Hello friends, welcome to the Angular interview question tutorial series. In the previous tutorial or part 2 of this tutorial series, we have seen the part 1 for Angular important question and answer. So this is the continuation of part 2 of Angular important question and answer. So in this we are going to see some more important questions with the answer which generally asked in the interview. So what is module loading in Angular? In Angular, a module can be loaded as a eagerly, lazily, and the preloaded. So basically, there are three type of uh, Angular module can be loaded using the means in the Angular. So what is the eager loading which we are going to see here? Like eager loading is a loading module before application start. Like once the application start, like before the application start, if we want to do some operation, then we do those kind of operation using the eager loading. When a module load, it load all the module component and the custom pipe and the services. Eager loading is useful in a small size of application. Why it is useful for the small applications? Like suppose before loading the application, if we want to write some logic, then what happen, it take time and it doesn't load the application early. So it's very risky to use this eager loading for the big application. So in eager loading, all the feature module will be loaded before the application start. Hence all the subsequent request to the application will be faster. Like if we write any logic before, then for the subsequent request it will be faster. And what is the lazy loading? It means when like module load based on the demand. And preloading is a loading module in background just after application start. Like application is start and in the background if we do some load module, then that is the preloading. And all these things you can see in part 28 of this Angular 8 tutorial series, where we have seen all this using an example. So next is question is the lazy like preloading in Angular. So preloading is a loading module in background asynchronously just after application start. In the loading, first app module load. Like when we launch any Angular application, first of all the app module load, then it load module like eager loading, and after that module configured with preloading, and it happen in background asynchronously. So preloading is useful when we want to see feature which are in high probability to be visited by a user just after loading the application, and it is demand loading module. Like suppose I came to one component, I landed to one component, but I'm looking like after this like this component, user can go to the some respective component. So what I do, I make the eager loading for that respective component. So in that kind of scenario we use the preloading. So we can create a custom preloading. For that we have to create a service by implementing Angular preloading strategy. So we have seen this custom preloading and the preloading in briefly in the part 30 of this Angular tutorial series. If you are not able to understand it properly, please go to this tutorial series and understanding using an example, so you will understand more about the loading modules. So what is like SPA and MPA in Angular? So SPA is basically single page application. Like these are web application that load a single HTML page and dynamically update that page as per the user interact the applications. And like multi-page application are the traditional web application that reload the entire page and display the new one when a user interact with the web application. Each time when a data is exchanged back and forth, a new page is requested from the server to display in the web browser. So that is the MPA. And what is like @input and @output in Angular? That is generally asked in the interview question. So basically the use of @input and output is the communication between the component, like parent and child component, that for passing data we use the @input and output. So @input is used to pass data from parent to child, and just opposite like output can be used when you want to pass data from the child to the parent, or vice versa we can do for the output. And next is the what's the life cycle hook in Angular. So Angular application has a life cycle right from its initiate to the end of the application, which is managed by the Angular. So first of all, in the Angular life cycle, constructor load, and after that there are some event which fire in Angular life cycle, like ng on change. After that ng on init, then we can see ng to check, and after that ng after content init. So all these event fire, and after that ng after content check, and then ng after view init, and then ng after view checked, and at last ng on destroy. So this is the basically a life cycle hook for the Angular. And the next is what is observable in the subscribe. So Angular observable use an interface to handle many asynchronous operations, like send observable data from child to the parent component by defining custom events. Observable and subscribe is used to handle user request and response asynchronous. So observable observe user request and response. So what is the meaning of this observable? Like I have a browser, and from this browser I am going to send multiple requests to the server. So in this request there can be a request as a HTTP request. So what happened, like initial two are the normal request, and third is the HTTP request. So what this HTTP request do, it go to the server and come back with the response. So it take time to do that, and after this HTML HTTP request, there can be some request which those has to wait until this HTTP request doesn't get the response. So to handle kind of scenario in Angular, we have observable and the subscriber. So what this observable do, it send the request or it work as a asynchronously, like this from here I send the request, and in between observable what it do, it send the request to the server and get the response, and this response is handled by the subscriber, and it come like this response is handled by the subscriber, and shown the browser. So that is the observable and the subscribe. So then next is the what is the difference between the observable and the promise, because the work for the both is the same. So in Angular we can use either promise or observable for handling asynchronous data, like both get and post method for HTTP and HTTP client returns observable, but and it can be converted into the promise using two promise method. So that is the promise and the observable. So what's the difference, like if both are doing same work, then what is the difference between these two? So the actual difference is like promise emits a single value while observable emits a multiple value. So that is the main difference. And while handling a HTTP request, promise can manage a single response for the same request, but what if there are multiple response to the same request, then we have to use the observable, and using the observable we can handle multiple response for the same request. And observable is cancelable in nature by invoking unsubscribe method, but promise is not cancelable in the nature, and a promise is not a lazy, where a observable is the lazy loading. So that is the main difference between the observable and the promise. And the next is what is JWT, or we can say JSON Web Token. So JSON Web Token is a open standard that define a compact and self-contained way of securely transmitting information between the parties as a JSON object. A promise is a not lazy, whereas an observable is a lazy. So they are basically two type of JSON Web Token are useful. One is the authorization and another is the information exchange. And the next is the session management. So sometime we need to store data in client side to use that data into the subsequent call. In those kind of scenario we use the session management. Like we can store data into server side, but it's costly in terms of application performance. Like if we keep everything on the server side, then for getting information from the server, it take the time. Like it is a performance issue. Like we have to go on the server and we have to fetch the data. So like we can use this option if it has a security risk to store data on the client side, then we can go for the server side. So we use HTML5 web storage to store data in Angular. Unlike cookies, the storage limit is at least 5 MB and information is stored locally, not on the server. In Angular, we use basically web storage to store the data, and the storage limit is the 10 MB. So there are some following store data into the client side. One is the in memory, like we can store data into the client side computer memory. Session storage, like value deleted once tab browser closed. And what is the means of this? Like once, like I'm going to get some data. Once we close the browser, the value um, deleted from that. So that is the session storage. And for the local storage, like value exists even after we close the browser or the tab. And what like basically what is the main difference? This local storage and session storage, it's the same. Like local storage, it store data with no expiration date. The data will be deleted after the closing the browser, as well as it work like a cookie on the browser. But for the session storage, it is like local storage, except the life cycle of it is for one session. Like once we close the browser or the tab, the value for the session storage is deleted. And what is the cookie in Angular? A cookie is a small piece of data sent from a website and stored on the user machine by the user using the web browser. And cookie persists across multiple requests and browser session should you set them to, and they can be great method for the authentication. And for installation the cookie, we need to use this command like npm install ngx cookie service and the save. So that is the command for the installing cookie on the Angular. So there are some common other question like what is a package JSON? So it contains the information of the Angular project. Like package JSON is a plain JSON file, text file which contain all the metadata information about the Node.js protection or application, and every Node.js package or module should have this file at root directory to describe its metadata in plain JSON object format. And what is the Angular CLI? So it's a command line interface to scaffold and build Angular application using using common JS module. So there are some command like in the Angular CLI, like ng-new is for creating new project, ng-serve is to running the project, ng-generate to create a component module, a directive or the service, and ng-test is used to run the testing. And what is the Angular testing? So we can test the Angular application using the two type of testing available in Angular. One is the unit testing and another E2E. E2E means end-to-end testing. So there are some tools given in the Angular for the testing, and one is the Karma. So Karma is a JavaScript test runner created by the Angular team. And next is the Jasmine. So Jasmine is a JavaScript testing framework that supports a software development practice called behavior driven development. And next is the Protractor. Protractor. So it's a end-to-end test framework for Angular and AngularJS application, and it runs test against your application running in the real browser. So basically these are the some important question in Angular. So if you have any other question or doubt, please comment. Thank you.